Welcome to the latest World Cup date, June 19th. All the action from France, and we've got a lot to talk about tonight. England goes through as the group winners. Japan goes through in second place. It's not likely that a third-place team comes out of Group D, but that's the match with all the headlines. We're going to save that. Jason Longshore, Jessica Sharman are here to first talk about England and Japan because Jess has opinions about the lineup that was shown first.
Yeah, we talked about this a couple of days ago, how, I mean, with Neville, you expect rotation. He's shown throughout his career that he's not afraid to sit people. He's not afraid to rotate. He's not afraid to rest. But when you've had a really decent run in your first two games, you would think you would take that momentum to build into the into the knockout rounds. For me, it seemed crazy to make 8 changes to a starting lineup when you have your biggest game next. You know, it's not the middle game seems like the most logical one to make rest if you're feeling pretty confident, because that's the game before you really need to get set on everything else. But to make 8 changes today, I was shocked. I expected 1, 2, maybe 3, but 8 is so substantial. And I think it impacted us. We had a good start, some good rhythm, but you know, unfortunately, not everything clicked. And what was concerning for me is the second half, we really looked shaky. We were fortunate enough to have some good saves by Karen in goal. But, you know, we gave them a lot of opportunities, and that's not really good enough. The one thing I said to you the other day that I really wanted to ensure we had in this game was a stable back line and to build out of the back and do things the right way. And we gave up far too many chances. And unfortunately, the Japanese just don't have the finishing in them at the moment. That was their weak link, and we were grateful for some good saves from our goalkeeper. 2-0 flattered us. That's what I'll say.
That's the big issue with Japan. 2 goals in the tournament, and both were against Scotland. They just struggle in front of goal, and that's not what we've expected out of Japan after making the final in 15 and in 11. They had a good bit of the numbers on the stat sheet. They had 16 shots. They had 4 on target. They had 48% of the possession. They passed at a good clip. You know, it looks like a pretty even game on paper, but that lack of finishing, that's going to hurt you when you get into the knockout round.
That conversion rate. You said 16 shots, but only 4 on target. That's not really good enough. And watching the game, we're not talking about shots from distance. We're talking about pretty close shots that they're just putting into the side netting, or they're not testing the goalkeeper. And I tell you, as an England fan, I was very grateful, because there were a couple of times they were through 1-on-1, and with a better finish, they would have scored. Like I say, England goalkeeper made a couple of very good saves. So did the Japanese goalkeeper. I was very impressed with her. Like I say, England, another game of kind of 2 halves. All the rhythm was in our favor in the first half. Didn't really finish our chances. And then in the second half, we rode a wave. I say that we got lucky. We defended. We put our bodies on the line. We had some luck with Japan missing a couple of times. But then we got a goal while the momentum was against us. And that's something that I am very happy with, because when you're not playing that well and when the other team is all over you, it's how you respond. We responded positively with a goal. And that's a good thing in tournament football, because that's showing that, you know what, even when we've got our backs against the wall, we have goals in us, we have chances in us. And the other thing is, again, I was disappointed with the squad changes, but doesn't that show squad depth, really? If you've got 8 changes and you're still beating a team like Japan, who perhaps has underachieved in this tournament, but is a quality side nonetheless, that shows that we have the squad depth to compete with a team like the USA, who also has a lot of strength on their bench.
Yeah, depth versus consistency at this stage of the tournament's an interesting conversation, because the depth is great, but you're only starting 11 of the squad, and you've got some subs you can use. But I think at times in the U.S., I feel like has been guilty of this, and I'm wondering if England is. Are you relying a little bit too much on that depth at the expense of really honing in on who you're counting on?
Yeah, I mean, you can only use 14 players in a game. So is there really that much in showing that we have 22 quality players, or we've brought I don't know, is it 25, the roster numbers, something like that? I mean, yes, it's cool that you have that many quality players, but does it really matter? No. What matters is that you're starting 11 that you're going to pick on any game day in the knockout rounds is going to get you through that. And I do worry with England that maybe we're giving minutes to players that aren't going to see many minutes in those knockout rounds. And is this the place to be giving so-called, I don't want to call them sympathy minutes, but sometimes that's what it looks like. You're giving players minutes to get them a run out and resting players who probably needed a few more minutes under their belt to hit their rhythm. Someone like Fran Kirby, who I think has not, I don't want to say underperformed, I think that's quite harsh on her, but she hasn't set the world on fire like some would have expected before. I think she could have done with a few more minutes today to sort of hit that rhythm before the knockouts. And instead now she sat down on the bench and won't play competitively until it really matters. And so it's a tough one. I understand resting players, but these are elite athletes that can play this number of games. The rest time between games isn't that terrible for these elite athletes. And I wonder whether that could haunt us in the long run.
I agree. I think sometimes managers overthink it when they have that much depth. Do you think England has a settled 11? Do you think Phil Neville knows who he's going to turn to in that first knockout round match?
I think the biggest tough thing was Tony Duggan, who was out injured, obviously, came back today, and she would have been a starter going into the tournament before she picked up that knock. And she came on today and looked bang average for her. And I think that's the sort of thing that's going to cause mind problems. When you have players that have the quality, have potential, you could say Fran's in that same mix. These players that can perform but haven't maybe been performing to a starting level. Do you take the risk and play them because they have the quality? Or do you have to play someone that's hot in the moment? And I would say with tournament, you have to hit someone that's already found their stride rather than waiting for a player to get there if they're not going to necessarily get there in time.
First time in Women's World Cup history for England that they've won all three of their group stage matches. They go through as the winners of the group. Japan also goes through as second place. Japan had clinched a spot coming into this match, but they didn't know if they would be second or third. They're going to be second after the result in the other match. When you look at the bracket and where that slots teams, Japan will be facing the winners of Group E, which will be either the Netherlands or Canada, and we'll get into that in just a bit. England will be playing one of the third-place teams, and there's three different possibilities, but all signs point to Chile. If Chile beats Thailand, that would eliminate Argentina, and Chile would go through. England-Chile, what do you think at this stage?
I think we're always haunted by good goalkeepers at the moment. We faced a lot of good goalkeepers. It seems like England's a team that goalkeepers have worldies against. And when you know that Chile have a quality goalkeeper, like, is it Endler that plays for Chile?
Yes.
I've got so many good goalkeepers in my mind. Yeah, there's so many. Everyone's having good goalkeeping performances. But with someone like Endler in goal, it's going to take a very good finish to beat her. And I hope that England can work on their finishing because it wasn't good enough today. However, on paper, there's only one winner in that game. Obviously, there's always an underdog. Anything can happen in tournament soccer. Chile probably wasn't expecting to make it out of the group potentially. So they've got all of that sort of nothing to lose mentality, whereas England will have a lot of weight on their shoulders because on paper, there's only one winner with the experience and the quality and the professional level of player that England has. So I don't want to say that I'm confident, but you would be crazy not to be confident facing, Chile.
There wasn't a winner in the other match, but it's one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Argentina came into this. They'd played 8 Women's World Cup games in their history coming into this match. They'd scored 2 goals ever.
Yeah.
They went down 3-0 in this match. And they became the first team in Women's World Cup history to get a result after falling 3-0 down. It's a 3-3 draw.
I'm not sure if that's like a compliment in a way. That's an odd one. That's an odd record. It's like you went down, but you came back. But you did go down pretty bad.
But that fight back, that's That's Argentina, and I think that's this group. And I'll tell you how this went for me. So I had some running around to do after stoppage time this afternoon, and saw that it was 3-0 and was like, okay. And I think everybody who listens to soccer down here kind of knows my relationship with Argentina, and it's what hooked me on soccer. And I definitely have a soft spot in my heart for any Argentine national team. So I see that it's 3-1, and then it gets to 3-2. So then I'm sitting in a parking lot watching the Fox Sports app, screaming my head off as everything unfolds on the foul in the 18, the eternity it took for a penalty to be decided, then the gamesmanship on the penalty with complaining to the referee, goalkeeper taking as much time as possible, Scottish player in the face of the Argentine players getting ready to kick it. I mean, it was way over the top.
I mean, they had a lot to lose, Scotland. I'm not going to defend the gamesmanship.
No, it's gamesmanship.
It's not.
It's what you do. If the referee's not managing it, you take advantage.
Yeah, she allowed it to happen. She allowed them to psych out the players. And honestly, Scotland, like I say, had a lot to lose,
Because they were all but sealed with a spot with a win in this. I think there was still an outside chance that they would not get through as one of the best third-place teams, but it was pretty much a lock that they were going to go through with a win here. All of the gamesmanship, saved penalty, but then it's looked at by the video assistant referee. Alexander's off her line, and it's retaken, and it's good. All of that took forever. I think the kick, and I sent you the numbers. One of the referee websites had all of this broken down, and there was about 6 minutes total of no play during all of this.
And that didn't even include, like you said, substitutions that took
4 goals in the half, and 2 yellows, and 4
You're looking
subs.
at nine minutes pretty much that you should have added on, right?
Easy. The foul, the VAR started at 86:04. The first penalty was taken at 91:20. Then play was stopped again 12 seconds later. Next penalty is taken almost 2 minutes later. Kickoff is taken at 93:50, and they showed 4 minutes of stoppage time. And the play was actually stopped at 95:07.
That referee just wanted to get out of there. She was 100%. Ready to go home and take a shower and, forget this game ever happened, I think.
And that's a big point here. And we've talked a lot about referees, and we've been critical where I think it's been warranted. Let's give credit to the referee in the England-Japan game. Not as difficult of a game to call, but she's had multiple strong games, and there's actually some consideration that she could be considered for the final. Claudia Umpierrez from Uruguay, she referees in the Uruguayan First Division on the men's side. She's been involved in a ton of different tournaments before. So a lot of experience, and you compare that with the referee who gets this game, and it's Ri Hyang Ok from North Korea. And when you look at the whole crew, and this was something I wanted to get into when it comes to VAR, a lot of people thought that discussion over 5 minutes between when the restart was delayed for VAR to look at the potential penalty and when it was taken, 5 minutes is way too long. 2, people were thinking that there was a bit of a discussion or /debate /argument between the referee on the field, and Bastian Dankert from Germany, the video assistant referee. I don't think they've ever worked together.
No, of course. I would never think their paths would cross. And honestly, like we've said before, most of these referees have never even used VAR before. It's a first, because it's been, it's not in many leagues. It's not in any female soccer leagues that I know of, and not many female referees ref in the male game, as we've discussed.
It took forever to get the call, and I thought it was a penalty watching it. Like I said, I was a little biased, and I was screaming in the car, and people were probably looking at me like, what is going on with that guy? But I thought it was a penalty. I thought it went in got the player's foot first and showing studs.
You have to feel bad for her, though. That girl literally just got subbed on. I sent you a tweet that shows that she got subbed on in a defensive play, and the referee didn't even stop to allow her to get on the field or even get remotely close to a position. So she's trying to make up and get back to defend. And you have to look at the referee and wonder, hey, why didn't you stop? Why didn't you wait? That's obviously, protocol with substitutions. But my biggest issue is with the coach, Kerr. For me, that's basic coaching 101. You never make a substitution when your team doesn't have possession, let alone when the other team has a good chance to launch a ball, such as a free kick.
100% agree. You cannot take that chance. Referee mismanaged it. I completely agree with that, but you can't take that chance if you're the manager in that situation. And I think there's been a lot of questions about Scotland and the coaching in this tournament. They struggled to get out to good starts before this match. They get off to a good start here, but they
game management was shocking.
Overwhelmed by the end.
Yeah, I think the game management was appalling, and that has, mostly to do with the coach. She's leading the players, but also to do with the players on the field. I'm not sure if they're mentally exhausted from the tournament, whether they got a little complacent at 3-0, which I think is probably part of the case. But when you're 3-0 up at 70 minutes, you have 20 minutes to hold out, and you let in one goal, you've just got to start, parking the bus. And when you let it get to 3-2, you just have to wonder why they couldn't hold out a lead against, again, no disrespect to the Argentinian team, but they hadn't really shown that much forward prowess in the rest of the tournament, and Scotland really made it easy for them. I watched the goals in the highlights. Obviously, I was watching the England game, and there were a lot of defensive turnovers by Scotland, and they allowed Argentina to walk through them. And again, I hate to go there. We've praised goalkeeping, we've praised goalkeeping, but Alexander makes a pretty bad error on the second goal. She'll be disappointed. Yes, it's above her head. Yes, it's a high, but it's central, and she has all the time in the world to get into position. Sometimes those are the hardest ones because you have so long to think about it. And then for the penalty, look, I know I keep saying that I hate the rule getting off the line. I do. But when you've seen it happen so many times, there must be, 3 or 4 penalties that have been retaken so far?
Yes.
Something like that. You have to learn. You have to realize you are not going to get away with it. And for me, Alexander was more focused on the gamesmanship. Like you said, she was taking forever. She wasn't really listening to the referee. The referee clearly explained to her multiple times, hey, don't leave your line. And for me, yes, she makes a good save, but that's not smart play. When you've been warned, there's no excuses to make that error going off your line early. And all goalkeepers in any league with VAR now are going to have to be aware. They're going to have to change their technique. It's not something that I like, but just how we see defenders having to put their hands behind their backs. The goalkeeper is going to have to learn to stay on their line because there's no hiding from the eagle eyes of VAR.
No, and all these interpretations are going to be something that it's critical for the way the game's going to play out right now. And I tweeted something that we've talked about before, that a lot of the people who are frustrated about this, and Shelley Kerr from Scotland is one. She said that some of the decisions were appalling, to say the least. It doesn't take away the fact we were comfortable in the game and conceded 3 goals, but there is a ball on the pitch, we try and make a substitution, and it's just an absolute farce. So much of the complaining, and especially around VAR, it's not VAR. It's the laws of the game, and the people implementing
definitely the law of the game.
No, that's always been there. I think that will always be part of the conversation, is how referees implement it and how different referees from different parts of the world interpret it. Mm-hmm. But in this situation, she's off her line. It's a call. It's a yes or no.
And the thing is, they have been. I would understand if this wasn't something that's been well publicized. There's a lot of rules that haven't been emphasized. I would say the one about defensive players joining the defensive players joining the wall, the handball, maybe haven't been talked about as much publicly. But you literally watch before every penalty kick. Right. And I had wondered this before I knew the rule change and before I knew VAR was getting involved in it. Wow, no referee's ever really spent a minute talking to the goalkeeper before about staying on the line. but every single penalty, you watch the referee warn them. And you have to realize, like, I don't know what it takes to realize you have a camera on you from 6 different angles. You know, there's no getting away with it anymore.
Yeah, it's completely clear. And that's the biggest thing that's interesting about the discussion is that people before, you'd always get the pictures of, look, the goalkeeper's off their line. Look, they're way off their line. The referee's got to call that. Well, now it's getting called every single time. And now it's, well, the referee, if it's close, they shouldn't call it. But you can't write a law of the game that way.
I mean, it's like goal line technology, isn't it? Like, there's no, oh, it was so close, it's in. You know,
No.
It's a yes or no. With these photos, you can tell whether the goalie is on or not. And like you say, you can't write a rule that's, well, if you're within 0.01 inches of the line, you're good, you know? And it's not a good rule for me. I don't like it. I think that when the lines people used to be, you know, in penalty shootouts, how the linesmen used to, or they do go in and they stand and get a better angle. I think the human eye is a fine interpretation of that, but just using VAR over and over again is a little excessive and tough on the goalkeepers when you consider, you know, my biggest argument is how high are the odds stacked against the goalkeeper already in a penalty, let alone making it even tougher physically for them to make a save, because stepping off the line is all about closing off the angle and meeting the ball quicker.
Well, in defense of IFAB, who makes these rules, they did change the rule to give the goalkeepers a step now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that previously wasn't in the rule, but again, it's back to how it was called. It was never actually enforced before, at least consistently. You'd see it maybe once a season in a league campaign.
Yeah. And then maybe in penalty shootouts, it might happen once, but very rarely.
Very rarely, but back in the original rule, you had to have both feet stay on the line. Now you can take that step, and I think it's going to be a technique thing that will take a little bit of time to catch up. I think goalkeepers are going to have to figure out, and you saw Alexander trying to time it where she would step up from behind the line to the line.
But I read that the goalie can't stand behind the line either.
I did too, and that was
I think
jumped
that
out
was
to
just as bad.
my mind.
Yeah.
Right. So
I think they really are. You have to be stood on the line, and the other thing I read is you can dive, you can jump vertically as long as you're not jumping out. Well, anyone that knows anything about goalkeeping is a dive. The main technique of a dive is that you dive forward.
Right.
Because that way, if you parry the ball, you're parrying it forwards, not flat. So technique for goalkeepers is just, you know, you can't not dive forward. That's exactly what the fundamentals 101 of goalkeeping is. You take a step forward before you dive. So what that means is the only way a goalkeeper can physically stay in line on those penalties is if they change their goalkeeping technique to something that isn't goalkeeping. So I don't know. That's what's tough for me, because every young goalkeeper that I coach, the first rule you teach them is you must always take a step and dive forwards.
Right.
Because otherwise you're diving flat, so you're pushing the ball into your net, or you're diving backwards, which is even worse. So it's just a hard one for me. But you're just going to have to wait that split second longer. You can dive forward once the ball's been taken, and we're just going to see a lot less penalties saved if people are going to do it properly.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing about the verticality part of it is, I guess if you take the step forward and dive, as long as your back foot is over the goal line, it doesn't have to actually be on it. It can be in the air over it. That would be good, according to the new
It's
rule.
just, this is a really difficult one to even call on VAR.
It's going to take time.
It's going to take time. But you know what? Like I say, goalkeepers have to learn, and the next goalkeeper that we see dive off their line, you got to just think, why? You've got to learn that lesson, you know, and it's been made clear. It's been made obvious. It seems like the defenders are learning about the handball. I've seen a lot of defenders with their hands behind their backs when balls are being crossed in.
And I wanted to talk about that, because this has been another bit about the interpretation, is when you read the rule, they're actually telling you in the rule, now the way it's called might be different, but in the actual written rule now, if your hands are by your side, that's judged to be good. You don't have to put them behind you, but if your hands are by your sides, that's judged to be natural and part of the silhouette. Yep. And I've heard commentators go through the whole thing about, well, now you're going to have defenders put their arms behind their back.
Because I think you do, though, because I think it's far harder to move your hands from behind your back to an awkward position. I think you're tempted, if you have your hands at your side, you're tempted to move your hand in a more awkward fashion. And if they're behind your back, you've kind of got them tied behind your back. You're less likely to make an awkward play.
Yeah, I think the rule's trying to give defenders an out, but again, I think the way they've written that one, they've really just messed the whole thing up. I think they've made it more difficult in that regard. I
agree. And it's just such a shame, Jason, as I thought it was a joke at first when we said every World Cup date we're going to be talking about referees, but it's really ended up like that. And you know why it is? It's because this is the first, it started earlier than Copa America and Gold Cup. This is the first tournament that's, world watch that we've seen these new adaptations to FIFA rules. And it's a tester, and honestly, it's a shame that all these new rules have been brought in right before this tournament, because at times I think it might have overshadowed the play.
It has, and it's a shame, because this match, we thought there would be fireworks in it. We thought it could be a sleeper for a match of the tournament. It is in a bad way, and it shouldn't be, because it's a 3-0 that turns to 3-3. I mean, you don't see those very often, and
no.
You get the magical story of Argentina getting their first point or their first chance to go through, their first comeback. They score more goals than they'd scored in tournament history before.
And yet we're talking about the refs.
Yeah.
Even though it's like a glorious story. And then Scotland, I don't want to be too hard on them, but they're using, yes, there was some disappointing calls by the referee, but at the end of the day, they were 3-0 up with 20 minutes to go, and they crumbled. And there's nothing else you can blame. Yes, you can blame the referee slightly, but that doesn't change the fact that they were 3-0 up. They were in control of the game, and they just, self-imploded. And that's, the only way I can look at it. You can't blame the referees for everything. They're human. There's going to be errors, and all you can control is the way you play on the field. And every time we talked about Scotland, we said it. They're not putting together a complete 90-minute performance. And maybe they got to 70 today, but 70 wasn't good enough when 20 minutes was an awful performance.
And I think that's what's so surprising on the flip side for Argentina. When you get to that point, you're down 3-0. It's your last game of the tournament. You know that even if you get 3, you're probably not going through. It's going to take a borderline miracle for Argentina to get through as one of those third-place teams. They didn't fold. I mean, the fight in that group, like, if you love the game, you have to love that, and you have to love watching that. And I really hope that group of players inspires the next generation coming through in Argentina and inspires more support, because
how could it
that was
not?
Special.
It was courageous. It was strong. I mean, the only team that beat them was England, and England's number 3 in the world, I think. Something like that, the ranking.
1-0. A 1-0 loss
1-0.
to England.
And they didn't look bad. They didn't look like a team that only has a couple of professionals in their lineup. And I'll tell you something, if I'm a scout for a women's Super League team or a professional league team in another country, I'm looking at some of these players and thinking, man, I could get them, and I could get them quite cheap to begin with, because it's their first professional contracts. And they've got quality. And I can see a lot of these young women signing professional contracts, and in 4 years' time you'll hardly recognize them, because that's the difference. The difference in this is that you've got players that probably aren't training every single day like the competitors they're playing against.
It has a huge effect. It doesn't affect the heart of that group. So that's, to me, one of the best stories of the tournament. Yeah.
And that was the difference. And Scotland on paper had the experience, it had the professionalism, it had the quality. But Argentina had the heart and the grit and the mental game. And we said it about Scotland the whole tournament. I just don't think mentally they were there yet. And I don't like to point out on the coach because she's an MBE. She's done a lot for Scotland and their growth of the female game. But you have to question some of her personnel she played, some of her tactics she played. And when you see Scotland come out and score 3 goals that early on in the game, you have to wonder why they didn't come out and have it at other teams a little bit more, because they had the forward pressure. They just didn't keep going for 90 minutes.
That's a great point. And then in this one, when you get it to 3-1 and definitely at 3-2, it's shut everything down. And you not making a sub on a set piece going against you, but shutting it down and defending and just locking the doors down. That one's going to haunt those Scottish players in the Scottish program for 4 years now. And I think for Argentina, it's going to be something that can push them forward. Argentina is not going to make the next round again unless you get a miracle. And what they're going to need is a draw between Cameroon and New Zealand tomorrow, and a draw between Chile and Thailand tomorrow. Cameroon, New Zealand, I could see a draw there. That's possible. Chile, Thailand, I'd be shocked if Chile doesn't win that match by a couple of goals.
I would say that Thailand might be inspired by their goal. They might get another goal. They've seen that they can play forward, but there's no way they're not conceding a couple of goals.
Yeah, I think Chile will go through as a third-place team fairly comfortably. Cameroon, New Zealand, that's an interesting match. I don't know if either one really has an advantage coming in. I think New Zealand's probably the slightly stronger team, but I've been pretty impressed with Cameroon in the tournament. Both of them have to open up and play for a win here. I don't know if New Zealand necessarily has that in them. They're a more defensive team.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's not many goals in the New Zealand team. They've been holding out for 0-0s, and as we saw with the Netherlands, they got pipped at the post.
And speaking of the Netherlands, they play Canada. And this one's actually pretty important when you look at how things could fall. If there is a winner, that team will win the group. If it ends in a draw, it's really tight because goal differential would still be the same. The Netherlands would go through at top with more goals scored. They have 4 goals scored coming in. Canada has 3. So the Dutch can play for the draw, but it's such a narrow margin. Do you think there is anything separating the Netherlands and Canada?
I think they're 2 really strong sides, but for me, Canada's been a little bit more ruthless at times. Netherlands, I watched their first game and just didn't think they got lucky. But I'm interested to see how it goes.
This feels like the prove it match for the Netherlands. If
yes.
They are going to make noise in this tournament, and I mean this is the team that won the last European Championships. This should be their time. This is the statement game. This has to be a win. It has to be a win for the Netherlands, or they're just going to be making up the numbers in the knockout rounds.
Mm-hmm. And that's what's so crazy, how it can be. These groups have been so close. Games have been so close. You don't know who's playing who, and I love it. It's been unpredictable, and it's so exciting when you see the viewing figures. I watched the live stream on BBC, and I love watching how many thousands of people are watching the online stream. It's brilliant, and there's people watching online streams of games you would never expect people to be watching.
The numbers all over have been great. FS1 had some of their best numbers for yesterday's matches, even without the U.S. playing. They had amazing numbers for that on American TV. Speaking of the U.S., they play Sweden. We've talked about Chile. I think that one's kind of an easy one to call. Chile should get through against Thailand. They should get through as a third place. U.S.-Sweden, I mean, I don't know what to expect with the United States. I'm like you with England. There's been so many changes. I don't really know if Jill Ellis has completely settled on a best 11. I don't know if Samantha Mewis is part of it. I feel like she should be. And I don't know what the plan is to break down a Swedish team that I think will try to get down the flanks and will try to put in crosses and exploit the U.S. and their back line that's been shaky at times against top competition. But I could also see Sweden sit back and defend like they did in the 2016 Olympics. That just drove the U.S. crazy, and Sweden got the result.
Hope Solo wasn't a fan of that one. I'm very excited to see how Hope Solo talks about Sweden on the BBC commentary. I might have to send some videos of that on Twitter because we know she has strong feelings.
I'm going to need some notes on that one.
She is nuts. But I think Sweden will come in with a game plan. They seem pretty well prepared for games. They've played slightly differently against their different oppositions. And I think going against the US, if I was them, I would hold deep and try and break on the odd counterattack, because we've seen that the US can be shaky at the back. And, all it takes is one chance to score a goal and to test the goalkeeper. And if they bunker up and they defend well, the defensive line is probably going to get a little lackadaisical, a little unfocused, and that's when it's time to pounce.
See, here's where things get interesting. When you look at the bracket, which is laid out ahead of time for the tournament, and there's been a lot of talk for the United States about, do they try to avoid going into the bracket where they'd see France in the quarterfinal? If they come in second, if Sweden wins this match, they go into a match with the runners-up of Group E, which would be either the Dutch or Canada. I don't think the U.S. would want any part of Canada in a knockout game in the round of 16, not that rivalry game at that stage. I don't think you want that there with all the emotion that comes into it. If you do get past that, you're likely seeing Germany. So either way, it's about the same level of competition in my mind.
Yep, I agree. I don't think you should ever play out for a result. I think you should always be determined to win, because if you're going to be the world champion, you're going to have to face them eventually. You're going to have to face the toughest competition, and what better way to go into tougher competition than on a win streak? Easily that. And when you look at some of the rest, France is more than likely going to see Brazil in the knockout round, which will be a fascinating match. We know Norway and Australia will face off, and we know, again, those runners-up of Groups E and F will face off. The third-place teams, from what we're expecting, would be Brazil, China. Nigeria is the one who really benefits from the Argentina-Scotland match. Chile and either Cameroon or New Zealand has a shot, but there's got to be a winner in that match. Chile will know going into the match with Thailand what kind of score they have to put up. And they're going to have to win by multiple goals, because right now a 1-0 win would still leave them 2 goals short of Nigeria. So 3-0 would put them through as things currently stand. Yep, and that's what's exciting, because it's going to open up these games when they know what result they have to get, which is a rarity. With the third place, it's an advantage for them that they know what score they need. For the other team, they've got to go out and just try and grind out a result and not really know how many goals they would need to score. But it's going to open up these games, particularly if they're looking to have to score 2-3 goals.
And here's the crazy thing about the bracket as we finish up. Germany will play on Saturday. We know that we'll have that Norway-Australia match on Saturday, but Germany will play one of the third-place teams on Saturday. We don't know, and that team won't know until the end of the matches tomorrow on who will be playing Germany on Saturday. That's craziness.
Yeah, that's a very different way to prepare for a game.
Yeah, it's just going to be a complete mess. And it looks like that will be Nigeria if they get through. That's what's so hard about it is Nigeria probably thought they were pretty much done going into today. The crazy result brings them back into it, but they still don't know. So, how can you really, truly prepare? That's where you're at in this tournament. And it's going to be a wild day tomorrow with 4 games. 2 groups finish up. It'll be the finale for the group stage. We'll be back tomorrow to wrap up the group stage and get set for the round of 16 that will start on Saturday. So we will know the bracket by the end of the games tomorrow. We can talk about those first 2 games and get ready for, I think, a tournament, Jess, that has been a lot of fun. There's been a lot of talking points, and we've talked way too much about referees, and I know we'll talk more about them. But I feel like the tournament's going to hit another gear starting on Saturday.
Oh, it has to, because no disrespect to those weaker sides, but you're sort of, ticking off and removing the ones that haven't been competing quite as well. So these next games are going to be must win. They're going to be tighter competition than ever, and anyone can win. And as we know with knockout football, it's just 90 minutes, It's not where you can make up for stuff later on in the group stage. So I'm excited to see it. It's been a better level of competition than I could have ever anticipated. And I'm almost not ready for the group stage to be over, because that means we're getting closer to the end of the tournament.
I'm exactly right there with you. It's been as compelling of a World Cup as I've seen, period. And, it's been as compelling of any kind of tournament like this that I've seen. And I don't even think we've hit the great stories that we're going to see in the knockout rounds. So we will finish everything up on group stage tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow evening to get you started with the first two matches in the round of 16. Thanks, everybody, for listening. The numbers have been amazing. The feedback has been great. As you listen, as things happen tomorrow, if you have questions, tweet at us at Longshoe, at Jessica ATLUTD, at Soccer Down Here. Tweet at Kelly as well, the Kelly Francis. And we'll be back tomorrow to wrap up the group stage. Thanks for listening.